Hello everyone and welcome to the Magic Show where you must be in it to win it. As always, I'm Jake and I'll be going over upgrades for the new Endless Punishment Duskmourn Precon. This deck solely cares about dealing damage to your opponents on their turns. By doing this, Valgavoth gets bigger and draws you cards. Ending games with commander damage is a very real possibility in this deck and one you must consider while brewing. Valgavoth, Herald of Souls, is a 4/4 for 2 colorless and Rakdos. He has Flying, Ward, pay 2 life, and states whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a 1/1 counter on Valgavoth, Herald of Souls, and draw a card. This is a very cool ability because you're going to be utilizing permanents that deal damage on your opponent's turns, whether it be whenever they draw a card, tap a land, cast a spell, or whenever they attack. The strategy I came up with for this deck is Staxdos. Play the red and black stack pieces we all know and love, while slamming down as many damage over time effects to slug the game out. All while dealing damage over time to give your opponents a slow and painful death, of course. Please let me know if you have any suggestions for the deck down below, which is where you'll also find the Moxfield list for my brew. Keep in mind this is a rough draft and almost all of my deck lists change over time with new additions and optimization. To start off, as always, we have Ramp. Ramp in Rakdos is exclusively mana rocks, and for that we have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Mind Stone, Rakdos Signet, Talisman of Indulgence, Thought Vessel because your commander does draw you a lot of cards. And let's not forget about the sad robot himself, Solemn Simulacrum. In the most boring but necessary category, Removal. Suspended Sentence. I think it's very good because it's free removal every 3 turns after you cast it, or suspend it, technically. Sadistic Shell Game is a strong spell because it removes multiple things that aren't yours and it's up to your opponents. First, not only do you remove the piece that you don't like, now your opponents can also remove pieces that they don't like, and none of it can be yours. Rakdos Charm is just a solid toolbox spell that can stop graveyard decks and go white token decks. And then as for removal staples in red and black, Feed the Swarm, Infernal Grasp, and Chaos Warp, of course. The 2 board wipes I am running are Blasphemous Act and Chandra's Ignition. Both can keep your commander alive, and Chandra's Ignition can end the game if Valgavoth is big enough, which he should be after a couple of turn cycles if nobody removes him. Now, stack those pieces. You've heard these cards before, you've played against them, you've hated them. It's Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon. Congratulations, now all your lands are now mountains. And the black spells we all have come to hate and love at the same time, depending on if you're playing with or against them, Opposition Agent and Delphi Voidwalker. Normally these stack pieces are better the higher the power level of the group that you play. I play a decently high power level, probably a higher tier casual EDH, so these are pretty strong pieces against my friends and opponents. Now we have the damage dealers. Okay, there's a lot of these and I'm not going to explain each one, so keep up, Buttercup. Mana Barbs, classic. You want to play the game, I'm going to hurt you for it. Enchanter's Bane will most likely get cut, but it's cool for now because I have a lot of friends with enchantment decks. Polluted Cards is just a pet card for me. Every time somebody slams a land down, that's 2 life to them, 2 life to me. And most of my play group plays fetches and ramp spells, so this is going to be fantastic. Roiling Vortex and Sulfuric Vortex are probably the 2 best cards in the deck because they will trigger commander 3 times every turn cycle. Zuzu the Punisher is kind of like Polluted Bonds. It's great against land decks, going to deal 2 damage whenever they play a land. Vial Smasher the Fierce and Karavik the Merciless will just hurt your opponents by playing the game, which we love in this deck. The Lord of the Pain, it's a secondary commander of this deck, and I actually love this card, but you must be careful when it becomes a 1v1 because whatever they cast will deal damage to you. Scytheclaw Raptor doesn't trigger your commander, but it's still a solid stacks piece. Rug of Smothering will stop those storm decks. Persistent Constrictor is one of those upkeep trigger cards like Roiling Vortex and Sulfuric Vortex, so it's going to trigger your commander every turn. Nightshade Harvester is another card that's going to hurt your opponents for playing lands. Mogus God of Slaughter is very good because it can trigger every single upkeep, depending on if they sacrifice something. If not, it's pretty good removal. Massacre Worm can obliterate a 1/1 token deck. Obviously, Cataract Parasite, secretly good 1 mana creature. Razorkin Needlehead, love this new 2 mana Negusar. Underworld Dreams, Fate Unraveler. Just be like, yeah, sure, have your card advantage, but take this 1 damage, butt face. There's obviously more in the deck, but I think you guys starting to get the picture here. Now, with all this damage, you think to yourself, I wonder if there's damage multipliers. And aren't you so smart? Because I do, and here they are. Sulfim Mayhem Dominus, Fear of Burning Alive, and a new door in Spiked Corridor and Torture Pit. I do want to say I could have included things like Oherexonal and Torbrand, but many damage doublers say whenever a red source deal damage, so I left them out. And before you say, oh well, what about City on Fire and Fiery Emancipation? They weren't included because they're kind of clunky in your hand and aren't worth it if you're only dealing damage 1 at a time. And finally, some other cards I failed to mention but I think will perform well here are Archfiend of Despair, which I do prefer to Wound Reflection because it is a creature and you can swing with it or block with it in a time of need. Chandra Awakened Inferno, which is just a planeswalker I've been trying to put in a deck for so long because I love that +2 ability. I love that pinger effect that you can stack on multiple times the longer she stays on the battlefield. And Kedis Emberclaw Familiar, which can really start hurting your opponents when Valgavoth starts getting bigger, so you can swing on that one opponent with no flyers and deal damage to everybody else. One last thing before I go, Shieldred the Apocalypse. would be fantastic in this deck, but is absent because of its high price. At the time of recording, it's $70, and it probably will be by the time you're watching this. If you're serious about upgrading this Precon and have the funds, I would highly recommend. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all enjoyed this video on my subpar upgrade guide to Endless Punishment in Duskmourn's House of Horrors. Please feel free to leave your suggestions and criticisms down below. I would appreciate it. But thank you all, and I will see you guys in the next video.